Recently, I was doom scrolling on Twitter and I bumped into a tweet that read as follows. In my opinion, if you don't have the means to experience a video game yourself, then you should simply not be a fan of it. There are more hobbies out there. Now, this one user sent out this tweet, which led into a conversation among some of the people in the quotes and in the comments, basically stating that if you don't play the game firsthand and instead experience this video game through video essays on YouTube or watching a Twitch streamer play it, lest you become a fan of this video game because you like the people cosplaying it or the memes and the jokes and the community around the story that you experience, you are an illegitimate fan. You are not allowed to be a fan or partake in discussions about this video game if you yourself have not played it for yourself, which in my opinion harps back to the age-old meme of don't mess with us Persona fans, we haven't actually played the games. Now, this discussion of you should not be allowed to be a fan of a video game if you haven't played it can kind of be interpreted in a couple of different ways, and has been interpreted in a couple of different ways that has led to a divergence of conversation underneath this tweet here. The first of which is, if you are poor, then just say that, bro. Broke boys don't deserve to play video games, which I think most people understand is probably not where this conversation typically leads to, given that video games, all things considered, are a relatively inexpensive hobby considering the 30, 40, 60 hours you can get out of the 20 bucks you might spend on Stardew Valley, Minecraft, Terraria, Mugenics, or what have you. But also, pirating is a legitimate option here. Now, most people will be on one side or another of basically stealing a video game, downloading it without paying for it. However, there are even some developers of video games that take the stance that piracy is not the end of the world. For instance, this very relatively famous tweet of the game developer for the game Ultra Kill responding to somebody stating that they were pirating his game, in which he said, "As the creator of said game, you should support indies if you can, but culture shouldn't exist only for those who can afford it. Ultra Kill wouldn't exist if I hadn't had easy access to movies, music, and games growing up. If you don't have money, you can support via word of mouth." And I think that there kind of puts a pin in why exactly this is sort of a stupid train of thought. Because, like, if somebody is deciding to engage with a medium without having actually played said medium, in the case of video games, 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10, it isn't because they don't have the money to be able to afford said video game. The vast majority of video games that people play are free. League of Legends, Fortnite, I assume some of the looter shooters that are going on. It's not like 30 bucks for something you're going to shove 100 hours into is an unfathomable amount of money. Piracy also exists, being able to have a game gifted to you, shared to you, playing a video game at your friend's house if they've got a physical disc. There are other ways to be able to play video games without having to spend your hard-earned money. The reality is that there are a lot of video games that require more than just money to be able to enjoy properly. For instance, in the situations of like multiplayer video games, Counter-Strike, League of Legends, these are games that you can only really enjoy the absolute pinnacle of if you are good enough to reach the pinnacle of it. Playing a multiplayer game that requires a high level of skill, like most, first-person shooters, MOBAs, and what have you, if you don't spend the time to get very good at the game, you might forever be stuck in the lowest tier bots and, 50-year-old retired dads playing one game a week after they get off work. You're not exactly experiencing everything the game has to offer. Whereas if you were to watch somebody on Twitch who spends 100 hours a week just playing this video game and they're very, very good at it, well, now you can, through them, experience the absolute pinnacle of what it's like to move and play and click, like Shroud, like, whomever you can think of. That is an experience you will only get by watching somebody who is a professional at that game. And no matter how much time you put into it, you're probably never going to reach that. Should that simply not exist for the 99% of players who are never going to get that good at the game, to never see what it's like to play the game at that level? Worse still is with games like Persona, you can't even get through those games in less than 60, 70 hours, and that might be like 4 or 5 months of free time that somebody has if they're working a full-time job or taking care of a kid or simply only have a couple hours a week to play a video game. it's a little bit difficult to say that, hey, if you truly want to be able to enjoy a Persona game, a Danganronpa game, or any of these things that are story-driven, it's going to take the better part of half a year before you can watch all of it, and that's not including the amount of time you're going to have to spend listening to video essays to catch up on all the stuff that you didn't do. God forbid you go for a secret ending, and now you got to play through the game twice. That's easy if you're playing video games 60 hours, 80 hours a week, but if you get 3 hours on the weekends, you're never gonna fucking finish a Persona game. There was a separate tweet that I don't think is by the same person that I'm unable to find at the moment, but it was basically along the lines of, why is it that full game playthroughs exist on YouTube right after the game comes out? Why is it that somebody can upload a game that just came out and play through the entire thing when, you know, people haven't even had the time to play through the entire game themselves, for instance? And I think both of these sort of tie into the same idea, which is that a lot of the time people experience video games through somebody else playing them. There are a number of games that people either don't want to play or don't have the time to play and would be completely absent of experiencing the story, the visuals, and whatever else that the game has to offer completely if it weren't for their ability to be able to watch somebody else play the game and then sort of be able to experience it through their gameplay when they upload it to YouTube or play it live on Twitch. The argument a teeny bit is that people who experience video games this way shouldn't be allowed to engage in conversation and discussions about the game. And I would argue there's a little bit of truth to that. Do I really want kids bitching about the balance of how a gun is overpowered in Fortnite when they don't play the game and they're only repeating what is said by Shroud or Ninja in an echo chamber of one person's opinion becoming the opinion of everybody else? Probably not completely healthy, but I'm of the mind that if you're still watching Ninja in big 2026, you shouldn't be allowed to have opinions at all. Devil's advocate just a little bit. If you don't play a game, you shouldn't be allowed to engage with the fandom, discussions online. You shouldn't be allowed to have opinions about something that you do not partake in. A teeny bit, yeah. There are a number of video games whose cultural impact escapes those that have simply played the game or watched through the entire game. There are people who are fans of things that they only remotely are aware of. Think of the equivalent of somebody wearing a Nirvana t-shirt and then not knowing any Nirvana songs. They just like the aesthetic of, you know, metal or whatever the fuck, Kurt Cobain and what have you. They just want to be a part of the cultural impact without having experienced why it was such an impactful part of the culture. And a lot of people would be like, yeah, that's fine. You know, if you want to enjoy the aesthetic, if you want to remember Kurt Cobain's legacy and what have you, then you can go ahead and do that. But at the same time, you probably shouldn't dictate which one of Nirvana's songs end up in the Hall of Fame if you have never heard any of their songs. The Grammys should not be picking who wins a Grammy if they haven't watched, listened, or enjoyed any of the artists of whom they're voting on. That should be a criteria if your opinion is going to matter. And if your opinion isn't going to matter, you shouldn't have an opinion to begin with. I sort of understand that stance. The counter argument to you should only be allowed to engage in a fandom if you have played the video game, in my opinion, is you also need media literacy. This is incredibly important. I cannot tell you the number of people who have watched an anime that I enjoyed, completely missed the fucking point of it, and I would argue would have been better off having never partaken in that media whatsoever and just remained completely oblivious, because their opinions on the matter, with their lack of media literacy, their inability to pick up on any subtlety whatsoever in the story, results in them just having even more dog shit opinions than they would have if they had just never watched the anime, played the video game, or what have you whatsoever. I remember getting into half an argument with somebody in a Discord call over Evangelion. They watched the entire show and they hated it, which is not new information for me. You know what I mean? As somebody who has been very vocal about my love for that TV show and the movies and what have you, I often get DMs on Twitter, messages on Instagram, messages on Discord that are like, hey man, I watched this show because you make so many jokes and memes about it, and I really thought it was thought-provoking, philosophical, it changed my life, blah, 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 whatever. Very, very, very occasionally, I will get, yo, this show sucked. I hated it. I didn't understand anything. I had one individual who was like, I hate Asuka's character so much. She pisses me off. She's such a bitch. I think she shouldn't exist. And I responded with something along the lines of, you understand she's supposed to make you mad, right? Like, you feeling like she's a bad character is all just to set up the tragic backstory of her having seen her mom hang herself and sort of explain the sort of irrational, over-the-top arrogance she has as a sense of trying to reclaim some control in her life. And they were like, no, I did not pick up on that whatsoever. Now that you say that, that actually does make a little bit more sense. And I'm like, I would argue you haven't watched the show. Like, you sat in front of it and let it play, but you weren't watching or had your brain on while watching, because that is a key characteristic to the character that you're bitching about, and you completely missed the point. And now you're out here with the credentials of I've seen Evangelion, spewing absolute bullshit because you didn't take the time to actually interpret the media that you were watching. You would have been better off having watched fucking Naruto and then go into those forums and have those discussions, because this one's way beyond you. I'm a little bit biased in this because I cannot stand horror media. Jump scares just give me a fucking heart attack. And so I have never played the Fear and Hunger games because it's a little bit too creepy and eerie for me. I have never played Silent Hill. I have never played Resident Evil. Despite that, I have watched numerous video essays on Silent Hill, on Resident Evil, on Fear and Hunger. I enjoy those games so thoroughly despite not having a single hour played in any given one of those. And I cannot explain how thankful I am to people who took the time to not only upload videos of them playing it and playing it live on Twitch for me to be able to watch and experience what it's like to go through the frustrations of dying in Fear and Hunger or not knowing what's going on in Silent Hill 2, and the people who take the time to explain all of the things that I am too stupid to understand. I never would have figured out the symbolism in Silent Hill 2 with the nurses and what Pyramid Head represents. I would never have been able to figure out all the backstories behind the characters in Fear and Hunger. Shout out to everybody who took the time to explain that for me, and now I can consider myself more well-versed in that fandom. I actually understand the jokes about the characters. I understand the jokes that, everything that I do is just to better understand the memes that I see online. I don't think I've ever taken the time to more properly research, more properly understand anything if it wasn't just so that I could further better interpret and enjoy the memes that I see shared online. And I would argue that's legitimate. Now, there are people that LARP a little bit too hard, right? Michael B. Jordan trying to say that he enjoys anime and his favorite character being Naruto is one example. Central C sitting next to Sabrina Carpenter while having a Nintendo DS out with him at like an event is a little bit over the top and performative. I will admit that. But it's video games and anime. Who gives a fuck? Is there a point where this stuff becomes a little bit too mainstream and people are doing a little bit too much in order to make it really obvious that they're doing this in a way that is only to further increase the value of their brand? Yeah, sure, but who gives a fuck? If people are dumping more money into this media, this video game, if there is a way for a video game to become more popular than just the people who play it, in what world is that a bad thing? We never would have gotten certain seasons of Futurama if it wasn't for people enjoying it way after it was airing on TV. We probably never would have gotten a second series of Morbius if it wasn't for people pretending to like it in theaters. Shit's funny if you let people get away with it. And I would argue that more people enjoying video games, even if they're not playing it, is probably only going to be good for video games going forward. I don't know how anybody could have the stance that if you're not going to stick a controller into your console and play it for yourself, then you don't deserve to be a part of the fandom. That's just elitism in something that absolutely does not warrant it. That does not apply to my channel. However, you are only allowed to be a hyena if you watch all of my videos all the way through. Want to do that? You gotta subscribe. Like this video if you enjoyed watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Spisu.